Sage, what's up, man? Well,
Hey.
why are you being so mysterious today?
I can't get I had to download, it's called OBS 28, and I'm having an issue with my virtual cam, working with my cam, so I'll have to figure something out, and I didn't realize it until I came on. StreamYard doesn't want to find it through my OBS cam. All right, so quick question, just a rough estimate, Rob. You don't have to say exact numbers or anything. Movement of freight, how much approximately gross numbers are you moving freight-wise? Either financially or number-wise?
I'll tell you in a second.
And I'll see where I'm going. So, and how many loads do you post without a rate on them?
I will post if I posted say 20 loads in a week.
Yeah,
three to four will have rates. The rest will not.
Okay. So when the driver calls up and says, "What are you moving this load for?" What's your answer?
Just a great example. I had a load that's delivering to a gas plant, and I get brokers this week. I had 2 loads. First question, broker carriers were calling me, "Hey, it was going to this refinery," and they were like, "What are you paying?" My first question was, "Is your driver clean shaven?" Because you cannot go there without a. So I didn't even bring up the rate. I said, "Why are you asking me about the rate? You didn't even ask me about what kind of load it is. You didn't ask me about any details." So, because even yesterday I had a load.
Let's pretend the carrier asked all the right questions and then said, "What are you paying on this load? What's your?"
Then I'll give them my rate.
Okay. Technically, right there, you're not a middleman.
Why?
Because you're giving them the rate for the load rather than saying, "What do you need to do this for?" Just so I understand how you're helping carriers here, but the actual job of the brokerage is to be a middleman and to go back.
But what if my shipper doesn't have a rate?
You give your shipper an approximate rate. Like when I give my shipper a rate, I say, "Look, the going possible rate for this is here." Okay, let's say it's $1,000. Let's do simple numbers. The going possible rate for $1,000. I'm going to go back. Let me see what I can find in the area. Could be more, could be less. Let me see where I'm at. But that's the rate I have between the shipper and the receiver. So somebody calls me up and says, I don't give, well, unless I deal with guys I know, that's different. I say, "Hey, this is, stuff like that." But if I post a load on the load board, my first answer is, "What do you need to move it?" Because at that point, it's not my job to determine what they need to move it. It's their job to tell me.
Okay, but hang on though, Sage. That doesn't always work because if you're a I disagree with that because you got shippers that have say 5 or 6 brokers out there and they just email out their available loads today.
Right.
They don't give you a rate. All the brokers are bidding on it.
Correct.
So that's where the problem in this industry lies, is because they're just throwing a number they think that the customer's going to like, but that doesn't match with what the carrier is doing.
When you start to give out price, you start to take possession of the freight.
No, you don't.
Yes, you do.
I disagree with that.
Absolutely.
I've been doing this for 15 years, and I've never had a problem with that.
You don't have to have a problem until you're sued.
Well, no one's going to sue me about it. I can guarantee you.
That's what C.H. Robinson said. And C.H. Robinson got a nuclear lawsuit for it. Basically, all they had to do was ask the driver where they were and have them do check calls, and they were considering taking possession of the freight. So, and I think that's where the actual issue is in regard to this industry. So many, and I'll fight this day and night. So many drivers don't realize that, look, it's your company, it's your LLC. Stop asking the broker what they have in the load.
But then, Sage, how is it when a carrier says, let's say a broker says the shipper told them, "We'll pay $1,000 for this load." Okay.
Well, let me ask, how many loads are you approximately moving?
Okay, I'll give you the numbers here. So last fiscal year, which is October 1st to September 30th.
Simple month.
Okay. So last year I moved 1,639 loads myself. Okay. And I did $1.2 million to $1,253,000 last year.
Okay.
Wow. I will give you my last month.
Just a month.
Okay, I'll give you last month. Last month I moved 135 loads for $140,000.
Okay.
So, build out.
Okay, so on that 130, and you work by yourself with all those still?
Yeah.
Okay. So in regards to each one of these loads, like I said, if every carrier that you had was sending you not that they shouldn't, but the issue is that you're one guy doing this, and when you're dealing with C.H. Robinson and all this other stuff, the person you're dealing, and I try to explain this, the person you're talking to on the driver is just a phone answering person, right? They're just a phone answering person. They're not a you. They're not a me, right? They're a phone answering person. So the issue that a lot of the guys are having is they think they're more than a phone answering person. The phone answering person looks at their computer screen and they see I have a range of 1,000 to 1,300 to move this load. Whatever, I don't know. I'm 1,000 or 1,500 to move this.
The problem is, I guess, have you ever worked for C.H. Robinson as an agent doing that?
I've had somebody come in as a C.H. Robinson agent.
I know, but have you?
I have not. I was a Landstar.
Therefore, you and I cannot discuss it because you and I have never been that person. So I can't give you the insight behind Sage Robinson.
I can discuss it because
we can discuss it, Sage. But unless you and I were physically employed, where we had a commission statement coming from C.H. Robinson, I'm sorry to say that we cannot give any advice on this YouTube channel or your YouTube channel unless it's someone with specific insight. It's all hearsay.
Well, then you're not an American broker. So you can't give you see what I'm saying? You still work with American.
I have an MC number. I'm allowed to broker freight within the United States and cross border.
Canadian. You don't know what you're a Canadian brokerage, right?
But you've never. But my point is, it's just like me being a Landstar agent. I can talk about how I know what Landstar is because they've approached me and tried to take over my business. But I've never been an actual Landstar agent and know the inner workings of it.
Say that I've had somebody a long time ago come from a C.H. Robinson who basically told me what they did.
Okay, so, but here's the thing, Sage. Just like my business, I'm an agent, and how I do my business, I can guarantee you, I have an agent that is 360 degrees different than me. They're 100, and they're the same company. It's the same. The load confirmation has the same logo and the same billing address, but yet how those people go to business and how I go to business are completely different.
Have you ever been a carrier?
No.
Okay. Have you ever been a truck driver?
Actually, yes. No, I have been a carrier. I've not been a truck driver, but I have been a carrier.
You shouldn't be able to tell truck drivers how to run their business. Because you've never been a truck driver.
Yes, I have. I've been not a truck driver, but pretty darn close. But I can tell you.
Wait, Rob, you can't be pretty darn close to a truck driver. Either you have a CDL or you don't.
I don't have a CDL, so I cannot tell a driver about his things, but I can tell a carrier about their operations.
I can't tell about C.H. Robinson, even though I've had somebody work for me a long time ago who worked for C.H. Robinson.
That's only one person. You would need a mix of people to give. Because what if 10 people are there and they have different?
Setting the level exactly. How many? How many do I have to have just so I have the Rob qualified number?
Minimum of 5 C.H. Robinson's agents on the screen at the same time telling the same story. Minimum 5.
Okay. Either way, you know what? I see this is kind of going nowhere.
All I'm saying is that I've been set in my shoes that unless giving advice.
What I'm actually telling you what is the legal requirements for a broker.
I can tell you that I have our company has a full legal department, and not once in all of the communication have they ever told me I am not allowed to tell a shipper a rate, nor because
you shouldn't be taking a supervisor. It's case law in the United States. You shouldn't be taking a supervisory role as a freight broker.
I can tell you, Sage, that in the time that C.H. Robinson's been in the spotlight with this, not once has we have a legal department.
I understand.
Not once has they bring up all kinds of industry issues, but they've never instructed. Because remember, I'm an agent, and our company does a great job keeping an arm distance between the agent relationship and right. So they do a great job. They can suggest things like, unless I break what's in our contract. I don't know
why your company does what it does.
All I'm saying is that I've never been instructed.
There are 2 case laws.
Hey. Hold on.
The issue is
Sage.
I'm trying to say
Sage. I'm going to mute you if you don't stop for a second. Hold on. Okay. Rob is trying to say he has a legal department and that's who he has to listen to. Okay.
I understand that.
Do you have a legal department on the scenarios that you deal with your freight?
A legal department? I have a lawyer.
Has your lawyer? So you have a thing from your lawyer where he actually wrote a letter to you saying, Sage, because of this, you better change your business operations?
I presented the case law that came up and said, hey, how
you presented it, but I'm saying, has he? How in depth is he with this?
Dude, I don't know how lawyers usually you go to a lawyer. Lawyers don't come to you. So when I have questions, I go to a lawyer. Lawyers aren't out there saying, hey, Sage, did you know about this? I go to a lawyer, I present this new case law, and I say, hey, this thing that went to the Supreme Court, is this going to affect me? And when
are you on the TIA board?
Are you on the let me finish a statement board? I present the case to what they said and what was stated by C.H. Robinson in the case law for this that went to the Supreme Court that they lost. And he said, yes, technically, here's the stuff. It's called a partnering agent. There is other case law according to this that technically you have to not take a supervisory role into a company's position. Or you become, it's the same thing like, dude, you can't, even the AB5 thing, you cannot take a supervisory role in somebody else's company without taking possession of the freight. I can show you article after article, case law after case law.
So what's your role? What do you do now then, Sage? So right now after this stream, you get an email from one of your customers. Sage, we got a new job.
Yep.
Going from a lane that you've never done before. Some little hick town in Iowa going to some little town in South Carolina. You've never run that lane before.
Yeah.
And you need 10 loads. How do you, and they want rates. How do you, and you're not allowed to give rates. So how are you giving a rate out? So
basically I say the approximate rate going for this is this.
How did you get that?
You can get it from Datboard. You can get it from.
So you're telling me that when you have a hick town this with a wide load and flatbed loads, combinations where there's going to be wait times and all these things. So
I look, I've been doing this for.
I know you've been doing it, but I'm trying to say you need to share to the audience that how you distinguish with this new law. How are you distinguishing yourself now?
Okay,
well, a new lane, what does a broker do with a new lane where they don't have the knowledge?
You ready?
Go ahead.
Okay. I can easily say that according to this closer town to this town, it's approximately this rate. Let me see what I can find equipment-wise through my network of trucks or wherever I could possibly get a rate from a truck that's in the area and see how much he will charge to do the load. And then I go to that truck and I say, I have a load of the following blah, 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 blah. How much would you charge to do that load?
Right. So so that's what you're doing. You're calling. So you would do a carrier search, call 5-6 carriers, get some numbers, and then present it to the customer.
Correct. Just like any 3 estimates. Just like most brokers require 3 estimates when it comes to overdimensional freight.
Was that stated in the, now it could be 3, but my question is, I'll be honest, I have not read the full law case in the C.H. Robinson situation, so I'm not an expert on it.
No, a lot of people brokers will go get 3 quotes, take it back to their customer, and determine from there, right?
But I guess at the same time, though,
how do you quote a 19 axle load? How do you quote a 19 axle load to your customer?
Well, first off, I would definitely be talking to some carriers, but before I call a carrier, I'm doing a bunch of research.
No. Doesn't matter. 19
I'm going to tell you
different.
I understand that, but if I have any experience, I'm not going to be jumping myself into a 19 axle load, but I'm trying to tell you that here's what I would be doing as a broker. If someone presented to me, my customer says, Rob, we got this big load. Most shippers are not telling you it's 19 axles. They expect you to figure that out.
Okay, let me give you this. Somebody wants you to quote a 200,000 pound load. How do you quote a 250,000 pound load?
Well, I'm going to look at the area that it's coming from. Where do I probably hang on? I'm trying to get to it, Sage.
But I'm telling you, it doesn't matter. And I'm telling you how you do it. You find the closest 19 axle carrier and you get the price directly from them.
So basically, every time we talk about what's happening since the C.H. Robinson law, brokers are useless idiots that are just pushing numbers from the customer to the carrier. We have no insight, we have no knowledge, we have no understanding of this. We're not supposed to understand.
There's no broker that's going to quote a 19 axle load.
No, but I'm Sage. I'm telling you what I've been doing for 15 years. I don't care if I'm moving one pallet,
right,
or I'm moving a 19 axle load, or I'm moving a full load or a rail. Before I talk to the carriers, I get my ducks in the line. I understand what the consequences of this
Let me ask you a question. What happens if a carrier could have did it cheaper? Because they have either let's say you have a load that a carrier has a better equipment, their truck's paid off, and this, and they can actually do it cheaper.
here's what I do.
You overcharged your customer then,
I
right?
could spend hours showing you my quotes. If I have a carrier like that, let's take this 19 axle load.
Yeah.
Step one, I always tell you, I do my research.
Okay.
I ask a bunch of questions first. I want to understand, because when I'm talking to the carrier, I don't want to be an idiot like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, I'm gonna review what states this load is going through. I'm
Sure.
gonna know, even if I don't know the rate, I want to know at minimum, when I have that kind of a load, do I need police escorts? How many am I going to need? A pusher vehicle? Do I need engineering reports? What am I going to need in the lanes? I don't know all the costs, but I know all the requirements.
You know who knows all the costs? Do you know who knows all the costs for their equipment?
The carrier does.
Carrier does. And you know why? You know why a lot of times you're going to be going with the either first available truck, or you're going to be going with the closest truck, because they charge you the minute they leave the door to the minute they come back.
Right. But here's Sage, what I'm getting to. You asked me a question. You said, well, what if this guy can do it cheaper?
Are you going to make your price for the 19 axle?
Hang on.
Take their
Hang on. You asked the question.
Yeah.
You said, if a carrier says, well, they got paid off equipment, they're going to do it cheaper than the next guy.
Mm-hmm.
But if I'm a smart broker, if I know I have a carrier that's going to do the load cheaper, and I have to quote a load for next week, and I asked, what do you think is a feasible question that a broker should ask? Saying, oh, I got this cheap truck. What's the next question I'm going to ask that carrier is, how often are you in this area? Well, I have a project next week that's going to take us 2 weeks. So I can do this with 19 axle, but I cannot do it until the second weekend of October. Now, I find 2 other carriers that are charging $7,000 more than the other carrier, but they can do it next week. So when I send my quote to the customer, I will give them option 1, saying, I have option 1 available for next week loading at this price. Option 2, I have a much lower price, but their equipment is not available until this time period.
That's exactly how I quote my freight to my customers. I don't give my customer I don't give the price to the carrier.
But we're missing a lot of steps in here. Like when I'm dealing with if I'm dealing with heavy haul loads, or I'm dealing with freight where there's multiple things on the play, I am breaking down, because when I do my quote, I don't just say, okay, well, I have 4 carriers each doing, most of them are between 3 and 3,500. So I can average, I figured I can negotiate it down to 34. So I'm going to take 34 and I'm going to quote it out. But what I'm doing is I take all the costs involved. So if I know that
here's my issue, and I understand what you're doing, but in my opinion, this industry is broke because brokers are quoting what freight should be to carriers, when carriers should be quoting their prices to brokers.
So has the FMCSA shut down Uber Freight and Convoy Freight? Have they shut down their Click and Goes and Book It Now apps?
I'm not telling you. I'm telling you what it should be.
But I'm asking, because of the C.H. Robinson case lawsuits,
because the
FMCSA reviewed this and said, what Uber Freight and Convoy and others that are out there, have they canceled, said you're no longer to do book? You can have Book It Now Freight, but you cannot post rates.
Yeah. It's an open bid. What I'm telling you is you're taking...
It's not an open bid, because some of those, we all know, everyone on this chat, there's some where it says bid now.
Listen,
there's some of those loads that says
the right as a broker to take possession of that freight.
So the Uber Freight and Convoy Freight, who are a technology company that has full people that came from Google, LinkedIn, Facebook, that are running. They're a technology company.
This is the time you're going to ask me the same thing I've tried to answer at least once. You want to keep asking the question, or do you want to hear my answer?
Go ahead.
Okay. You have the right to take possession of that freight, but it technically puts you in legal responsibility if something were to go wrong and you were to be sued, because it is not your role in that. It is not your job. So you still have the legal reason. You can go ahead and take it. You're not going to go to jail. You're not going to be terminated. But when the lawsuit comes down, you're going to place yourself in direct middle of that lawsuit as a freight broker. In my opinion, and anybody in this chat is welcome to, the way that there would be a lot less broker anger and a lot better situation if carriers knew their numbers. And I didn't give if people did it the way I did it. Hey, how much do you need to do this load? And then I go back to my customer, and then I got to make my money on top of their money. It would be a better industry if brokers didn't give prices down to I don't give a price to my plumber. Why would I give a price to the person hauling the freight?
How much profit do you typically put on your freight? Because if you're just taking numbers from a carrier and relaying that number to the broker, to a shipper, with no insight, No.
Oh, we all have insight. Our job is to know the insight.
Why? We've taken, if we have 3 carriers and you fail to give all the details, right? If you fail to give all the details and you took these 3 brokers, carriers give rates, but hey, how much were you charging this lane? How much were you charging this lane? But you forgot to tell this, then you go to quote it. This is where the industry does fall down, and I agree with you. If a broker who's bidding on a freight, then the shipper, what if the shipper forgot to tell you that you quote on all this? They take your load, they give you the PO. Oh, by the way, we need 24-hour spot. Well, that's going to cost you $500. Well, we're going to take the load back and rebid it out now.
Sure.
Right. But here's the question though, is because the broker didn't have enough insight in industry. So the point is, what you're saying is that now brokers we're peons. We have no value to nothing. We're just relayings of numbers. So to put a percentage of profit is not what we should be doing. What value do you bring to this transaction, Sage? If you're just taking carriers' numbers and relaying it, why should you be putting 12 or 15 or 18%? What do you do to add value to this load to give you the 15% profit? Shouldn't it just be a straight flat $50 booking fee?
No. So now what?
Hang on. Why? Why is that?
I don't know. You're gonna let me finish? Because when I go to say something, you cut me off every single time. So let me know when you're done.
Go ahead.
Okay. So again, like I said, when a customer, I've given my customer, an approximate price of the area it should be. For me, differently, I can tell you what type of truck it's going to go on. I can tell you approximate how many cops are going to be used, where you're going to need oversized permits, where you're going to need overweight. I can tell you where the permits are all going to be. I can't tell you what they're going to be because it all depends on the weight of the truck, hauling it plus the load. But I can categorize all that. I can make sure the proper truck shows up for the haul the load for that van. But this is exactly it. The issue is that when it's a van load and it's you tell me at this point, when it's a van load and all the tracking's being done by GPS and the broker's getting further and further away from it, what value does that technically have is the verification that the carrier has the proper stuff that it has. I'm just being honest with you. I'm just completely honest with you. I'm just telling you the truth. Technically, brokers feel they have a hell of a lot more authority and power than they actually do.
I have a question, Sage. You ready?
Yeah.
So if and I think you've dealt with this before, but let's say you book a load.
Yeah.
With the carrier and they're hauling a tank.
Sure.
And that tank isn't strapped down correctly. It rolls and kills a family in a minivan.
Yeah.
That lawsuit is going to fire at everybody. It's going to fire at the trucking company. It's going to fire at you. It's going to fire at hell, even the city. Let's say they hit a bridge and that's what caused it. They're going to fire it off at the city. So I don't understand this fear of what happened to C.H. Robinson. I think that the broker is going to get part of that lawsuit regardless.
Right. And they have to find a way that basically for them to say, no, I'm actually not a part of this. And that's one of the things that, like I said, and this is what I'm trying to explain to drivers and what they don't get, because I get this all the time. It's like, well, how much do you have in it? Well, how much do you need to do to cover the load? And they're just too dumb to answer the question.
Okay, well, Sage, I'd say
literally cannot answer that question.
But I would interject to say that what you're saying is the approximate when it comes to heavy haul because of the unknown factors. There's factors like a lot of carriers, when you're doing heavy haul, you and I both know they estimate, oh yeah, the permit fees will be this and that. But once you actually apply for the permit, then all of a sudden they realize, oh, well, there's construction in this road. They're going to reroute it. And now the mileage is much further than we thought, because until you can run all the estimated permit software you want, like oversize.io, and get some estimated cost. But I can tell you, if you ask anyone that uses oversize.io and relies on those numbers, every single time you will be low. They don't account for the true cost. So it gives you a rough idea. TruckStop offers an oversize free tool to help you get an estimate on oversized loads. But when you quote a customer saying, my approximate costs are this, here's the variables, and we don't know. Now, when a customer issues you PO based on that quote, you've made it clear that it's an approximate. I will keep you posted on all final charges as soon as they happen, and they're under the understanding. However, that's a small piece of the marketplace. I can tell you that when there's a water company flogging out 25 loads of water a day out of a warehouse, not one of those loads are approximate. The buyer budgeted $600 a load on their end. And if you're, or say $1,000 a load, and if you're paying as a broker $700 to $800 to the trucks, and you're making between $100 to $200, the brokers are not going back saying, well, this truck needed $1,200, so I'm have to charge you $1,400. I can tell you when C.H. Robinson, or even myself, I've had loads where I've bid it out and I had to be at that price. And where the risk comes in for the brokers, let's say you're a broker that has water loads and you're doing 5, 10, 12, 15 loads a week of water. And now one of the loads, the driver arrives on time, he checks in, does all he's supposed to do, and the warehouse had a problem. And the shipper says, no, I'm not paying wait times because we do so many of these loads. And the broker, if you want it, you have the choice as the broker to pay that carrier or not. And 9 times out of 10, I pay the carrier. Just the other day, I had a load. We picked it up. I phoned the guy on Friday. It was 3 totes. And he says, no, we're not going to be around till, because I had a truck on Friday. He says, no, because it's see, again, back to when I was saying, understanding the relationship. My customer had freight to pick up at a shipper, delivered to a consignee, where my customer's name's nowhere's on the paperwork, right? It's they sold the product and they're helping their customer that says, hey, we don't need this stuff. They found another buyer for their product and we're shipping it. So luckily, my customer says, yeah, ready for pickup on Friday, Rob. So I did my due diligence by phoning the consignee first, saying, hey, I have a truck that can pick up and deliver today. And he says, no, we're not going to be around till Tuesday. I'm on a job. My whole crew's busy. Okay, we'll be there by Tuesday. So he said, you can deliver Tuesday to Friday next week. So Tuesday morning, I book up the truck. Driver calls me, picks up 8 o'clock in the morning. She's on her way. I phone the guy. Well, we're not going to be there until at least the next day. We're at a job. I thought you were going to call me. Well, you told me you're available starting Tuesday to Friday. So we laid over the driver. I paid $250 to the layover to the driver, and I never upsold that. I paid that exact dollars. In fact, I even sent a screenshot to the carrier to prove that I'm not making much money on this. So the guy, again, we had some miscommunications on this one. Next morning, she goes to deliver at 8. No one's there. He says, oh, I thought you were calling me back. I said, well, I thought we were in the impression that, he says, I'll be back in Edmonton. I'll be back now into Calgary for 8 o'clock. So long story short, finally delivers at 1 o'clock. And I tried to pay the driver extra wait times because they had to wait from 9 o'clock to 1. And the carrier, when I showed them, I said, look, I'm not overcharging on this load. I showed them the screenshot of what I'm charging the customer. I showed them that I did not upcharge the layover fee, and I added this in there. And I was making like under 10%, like 8.5%. And they said, don't worry about it. We're not going to charge you the wait time. So my point is that brokers do have the risk in certain loads, because when you bid on a PO and you bid $1,000 load for the next 20 loads, when things happen outside of the norm, that's why brokers sometimes try to make $300 or $400 on a load, and then there'll be other loads of that 20 loads of the PO, they're going to lose $200. And at the end of the day, they hope that they average out those. You're dealing with heavy haul is a completely different game than dealing with a distribution center where there's a buyer who's bid on.
Look, I've driven as a truck driver picking up, and I still knew my numbers.
I know, but the problem is, what I'm saying is that, Steve, let's ask Steve this question, and the chat can bring this in. Of all the dry van and reefer freight that you've booked in the last week,
right,
has any of them been approximate rates where you finalized the rate after the load was done to determine what the final charges would be?
Say that again.
So of the loads that you booked,
mm-hmm.
was any of it negotiated with the broker as being approximate costs? And then after the load delivered, you finalized the costing based on what the job actually required?
No, you booked the load, and I base the rate that I quote for what I need or what I want, and it covers what I need, and I took everything into consideration.
But there was no hanging element with the broker agreed upon on the rate confirmation that the base rate is X dollars.
Like detention?
Detention would be a variable, but only if it's negotiated, because that's the thing. It all depends on negotiations of that piece.
Right.
Have you had
I did have a load that was I had to come back and get more money because the broker didn't have the proper delivery time, so therefore we had to sit on the load.
Yep.
So is that what you're talking about, Rob?
Well, so now my question would be: was that a broker communication error on their end, or was it the shipper didn't provide it? So where I'm saying with this, Sage, is that there's a time like that when, let's say, the broker did screw up and realized, hey, I forgot to give the driver the right times, or I gave the driver, I keyed in, like say there's a company that they have 10 branches for, and the carrier mistakenly entered the load confirmation to another branch 50 miles up the road. Was not the customer's fault. The carrier says, hey, I'm here. They said this is for this other facility. Oh, shoot, you're right, it is. So the driver's got to go there, and maybe he had a reload out of that city. So he says, well, it's 50 miles out, and I need 50 miles, so I need to get paid. I need to get paid 100 miles extra, right? So I need to get paid 100 miles extra. That's all going to be on the broker, not on the shipper. Because if the shipper's email was clear, here, the broker has risk in that. Their administrative errors can put risk to the broker. I could be wrong on that, but that's my perception.
Quick question too. Steve, if you had to basically tell them your price for the load, how many times do you go to your customer and you tell your customer, hey, how much do you have in this load?
I don't, but they'll tell me. In other words,
like a direct customer. Or Rob, how many times do you go to your customer do you go to every one of your customers and say, hey, how much do you have in this load?
No.
Why?
They never tell me that.
Why?
They expect me to give them the insight.
So shouldn't you expect the driver to do the same thing? You're now the customer to them technically.
But okay, but I agree with you. But let's ask this question then.
Yeah.
To that point, if the shipper doesn't know the cost because maybe it's going to some new job, new lane that they've never done. Okay. But hang on. Let me just quickly ask, then I'll let you answer.
Very, very rare that the shipper doesn't know a cost of bottled water to go to a distribution plant. So let's pretend once the shipper doesn't know, they've learned what it should be, and now they know because they push out 1,000 loads a month. So let's go with you're going with two different things here. You're going with a spot market price that might happen once in a while, and then you're also going with bottled water that happens every day. So bottled water happens every day that goes to the same distribution center that the shipper does know what it costs to move. At some point, shouldn't the carrier come to you and tell you how much you're supposed to move it for? Because I don't go to my customer and say, hey, how much do you got in this load? How much do you have in the bank? How much do you have in your credit cards? So at some point, I want the carrier, the person that wants to do the job, I don't want to go to them and tell them how much I'm paying for this. I want them to tell me how much they can do it for. And I think until truck drivers start to figure how to do that, they're going to be stuck in the same cycle.
I think they are doing that, Sage, because how many times what does Steve and other channels talk about? Well, if you see a load posted for 1,000 and you tell them I need 1,500.
What if Steve, let me ask a question. If a load didn't have a price posted, do you call on it?
Yeah.
And then at that point, what do? You ask how much they have in the load?
No, but what a lot of brokers do is like I'll we'll use 1,500 as an example.
Sure.
I'll call in a load
with no loads, right? No money, right?
No money on it, and they'll say, let's say the 30-day on that's like 1,200. I go, well, I'd like to be around 15. Like, oh, well, I can only do 1,000, and that's all we got in it. I had literally one broker tell me is like, I'm losing $10 on this deal, and that's a negotiation tactic that they use.
Sure.
And then let's say I don't do that load, and then 3 hours later, when that load desperately has to move, now all of a sudden that $300 that they didn't want to put up is there now. So that's a tactic that brokers use is they want to make you feel bad for taking their profit away. So,
sure.
So there are brokers that will tell. I mean, and we don't know if it's legit. I mean, I can see a send. I can see what rates are going for on the broker side. So,
right. I think
now,
like if a customer gives me that spot rate, right? That we haven't moved before, that it's that situation. Now, if my customer comes to me and says, hey, I have another one of these loads that went from here to here that we did last month. We still in the same area? I'll check, right? That's different. They've moved it before, right? So you have loads that you've moved before, but the shipper knows how much they're moving it for. It isn't their first day on the job, right?
Sage, I would say, I guess you have to look at it back to when I talked about customers and acquiring customers and processes. You have two types. I'm just also going to prove a point here that it's interesting, but so the summary is this. You got some shippers that are booking 10 loads today,
Mm-hmm.
the 16th for next week, or the 2 weeks from now. So the brokers are bidding on that PO to get a price. Like you said, they're coming up with an idea whether they're using DAT averages. Because hang on, when you say that carriers are supposed to determine the rates, but yet brokers are using lane averages from some load board to determine a rate, which is below what the actual drivers need to do it to stay profitable, that's where we run into one issue. And so we got the customers who are pre-booking freight, and that could be on a contract basis, or it could be a spot market. They have 5 brokers that they email out saying we got 10 loads starting October 1st. We need a bid on. So the brokers are bidding it out, and then Monday they're going to award it to one of those 5 brokers, those 10 loads, or maybe they're going to give it to 2. Now, if a broker that they have comes in at 1,500, where the shippers start to question is when they see 3 of the brokers bid 1,200, and one bid 1,800, and one bid 700. Well, they're going to throw away the 700, they're going to throw away the 1,800, and they're going to give it to one of those 3. But if they see that if they have 3 brokers and one bid 7, one bid 18, one bid 22, they're going to scratch their heads because they don't even know what rate it should be, because they're seeing all these. They're going to say, well, why is it? They might, you know what, that if a shipper was in that position, they had 3 brokers and they got that kind of range from 800 to 1,200 to 2,200, guess what that shipper's going to do? They're going to find a 4th broker. That's what they're going to do. And so my point is that when you look on the load boards, I'm looking at DAT. So I can almost share the screen if I needed to, but on that, I did a search of loads. Chicago to Houston, Texas for today, 53-foot, 200-mile radius. There's 995 loads. How many of those loads on there have posted rates of the 995? How many loads of those do you think have a rate next to it?
Couldn't tell you.
149.
Exactly. And why is that?
So meaning 149 divided by 995. So 15% of the loads posted have a rate. The rest of the time, there's negotiation because you have to phone and find out the details and get the rate.
Right. But at some point, I don't, and I don't give are you not? I don't feel it's my job to tell another, and maybe it's just me moving over dimensional freight. And look, man, I've moved, I don't even know what it is. 100, I'd have to log in. The last 40 days, $180,000 worth of freight in the last 40 days. And maybe it's the way I do things, but I know what type of equipment to ask for to make sure I get a proper price. I'm not going to ask for, I'm going to say, hey, do you have a 7-axle? Rather than, because if I just say, hey, I have a load going from here to here, they're going to say, yeah, I can do that, but they're going to quote me on their 10-axle because that's the only thing they have that can do it. I know, hey, do you have a 7-axle stretch, or do you have this, or do you have this? I know what equipment to ask for when I get the quote. But for me, even when I do my legal freight, I have a load going from here to here, it's blah, 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 and I get into it. And when they say, oh, how much are you moving it for? How much do you need? And I'll be honest with you, the better carriers, the better trucking companies, the better ones don't ask me for the rate. They don't care. They come back and they say, hey, I'll call you right back. Or they'll say, hey, I see you got this load. You got all the stuff posted. And they give me a rate. They don't even ask me. And I'll be honest with you, those are the better carriers that I usually keep.
Well, so the argument is, who sets the acre?
Who sets the
I thought your shippers know the rate.
Anchor.
Isn't your shippers, you said your shippers know it. So to Steve's point, yeah.
Well, because the rate is like bill.
Because like a posted rate means nothing to me unless it's ridiculously low. I won't call on. If it's ridiculously low, I won't call on that one. But if there's a posted rate, because like TQL, they'll post the same load like 5 times. Sometimes there's a rate, sometimes it's not. And when they post a rate, like I've literally seen this, they'll post a rate of 1,000 on a market that should be paying 15, or normally pays 15, and then 10 minutes later they'll have one at 1,100, and then an hour later they'll have one at 1,300, and then a half an hour later they'll be back down to 1,000, and then when I see it go up to 14, I call them. No, we can't go above 14. I'm like, okay, well, thanks, have a nice day. And then I'll call them literally 5 minutes later and get that 1,500. So I mean, so to me, it's apples and oranges. Who sets the anchor? And I think a posted rate, that's all it's meant to do. It's a psychological
Correct
trick. Just because they post it for 1,000 doesn't mean that's what they have in it. That doesn't mean that's what the shipper is paying. Because so to me, it's not a transparent thing. It's more of a, we're setting the anchor now. So if 1,000's too low, we're not even going to bother with you, because they're looking for the cheapest truck to move it for as cheap as possible. But as you and Rob have demonstrated in the past, you guys aren't looking for the cheapest trucks. You're looking for the carriers that know what they're doing.
Correct.
Well,
that's why
just as many brokers, there are just as many brokers that don't know what they're doing, that don't take the steps that you guys take to analyze and price and everything else. There are a lot of carriers that don't do the same thing, which is why a lot of people are struggling right now. And that's part of the game.
Here's the biggest point I have, and you can disagree or not agree, but here's the biggest point I have. And I say this about a lot of things, and it happens in a lot of other aspects of life. So the government steps in when we don't know what we're doing, right? And I've said this on some of my other ones. The dumber it's our job to get smarter and get things right. And if we can't get smarter at what we do, government likes to step in and tell us what to do, right? That's what happens. So as long as carriers keep asking how much money I'm paying on the load, like I said, I've had this all the time where I've hung up on guys. Hey, how much and when I said, how much you looking to move? How much do you need to move this load? And they're like, well, how much you got in it? Click. I'll move on.
Well, that's understandable. I've never asked that. I've never asked what the only time that I know, quote unquote, that the broker has into it is when they tell me, because it's a negotiation tactic. They want you to feel bad that you're asking $1,000 over the 30 days.
What I'm saying is I could post a load right now. You know what I'll do someday? I will post a load and I will record the entire thing. And I will let everybody hear the ridiculous of, maybe not the drivers here is what I'm saying, but the ridiculous of the mass amount of drivers out there that have absolutely no idea. No idea. I mean, can't even give me a number. I would feel better if drivers gave me a number. Like, I don't know. What do you got in it? No. What do you need to move it? I don't know. Like, what's it going for? Like, what's it? Just seriously, you don't know your numbers. You don't know what you need to make a profit. That's how bad it is out here. I hate posting my legal freight. I hate posting my legal freight. Hate it.
Sage, to your point, I agree that the brokers, as far as them setting the rates, is an issue in the industry. But at the same token, though, to the C.H. Robinson case, which I said I have
hang on. Just trucking with T-Bone. If you don't know the numbers and how much that to move the load, who's the professional? Me, the guy that hangs up, or the guy that doesn't know his numbers? That's my point.
But Sage, I think that we're also missing the point that we do have to have there's a bit of a respect to both the brokers.
I don't have time. I don't have time.
I know, but Sage, okay, how did you ever learn? Who taught you?
Not a broker. Who taught me how to do math?
Who taught you about lane rates? Who taught you about lane rates?
Who taught me how to do math? Because when I had my own carrier, it's about Landstar gives you a course. Steve, do they still give you a course on how to do your numbers?
What, at Landstar?
Does that equate to lane rates, though?
No, it doesn't matter, lane rates. But the point is, lane rates don't matter. That's my point here. Lane rates don't matter. Do they give you a math on how to calculate your profit at Landstar?
Yeah.
Okay. So it doesn't matter what the lane rates are. So that's what I'm trying to tell you. Let's say the lane rate's $1,000, but you need $1,200 to take a profit. Is it more important to get to $1,200 or to do it for what the lane rate is?
Well, yeah, but you also got to know, like, if you go to Miami, you ain't going to get 250 coming out of Miami going to New York.
You need to know how much you need to go. You need to know your profit to figure it out, don't you?
I know, but Sage, to that point, though, if you know you need 250, if you've done all the math perfect, your numbers are solid, and you say, for me to run my truck, every time I move my truck, I need 250 a mile.
Correct.
You go to Miami.
Okay, it's a high number.
The very first time you go to Miami thinking, hey, I got $3.50 a mile or something.
Correct.
Now you get there and you realize I'm only getting $1.10. Well, that's not going to work for me. What are you doing?
Well, I don't know. Do the math. Did you get enough money going in then to come out? And
they didn't know this, though. How did they know that the freight's only
Why are you in business if you don't know what it costs you to run?
Well,
you can know the cost. We're talking about what the market's paying versus what your cost of operation is.
In other words, the lane averages do matter, because if your costs are so high that you need 250 all miles, you ain't going to Miami, because Miami does not support a 250 mile truck.
If I'm in it, why do we baby people? This is the problem. It becomes panhandling. I'm not going to lie to you. So if you know you need 250 and you're trying to take a load into Florida, and you take a load and you call on a Florida load coming out of Florida, because technically, if you're going to run a business, you should get a load coming out before you go in, but they don't. I always did. I got a load possibly coming out and say, can you hold that for an hour? I'm about to check on another load. Yeah, I'll hold it for an hour.
But in this market, loads are going so fast, I can't even email or call fast enough before I can book the next load. So my strategy is I stay in the lanes. I don't have to do that.
Okay, so because of the supply and demand,
right?
Okay, so basically, it's you are now teaching so people are better to go to you, a consultant / business, somebody that's going to explain the business model. My problem is you want me to teach the business model of a carrier as a broker to carriers. That's what you want. You want me, the broker, to teach you your business, your carrier business model to you. Shouldn't that be your job?
But I guess but hang on though, Sage. If we know that if carriers are the ones setting the market rates based on their profit and cost of operating, hang on. Why in over 20 years has the Florida market never changed?
It has changed. Florida market does change.
Not how many times have you gotten $3 a mile out of Florida from me?
You do know that produce season with reefers, Florida market changes, right?
Yep.
Compared to okay, so
I'll agree with that.
So the market does change if you know the industry.
But if you're a dry van carrier, it's generally know that it's cheap,
changes.
Right?
Even during the reefer season, the van market comes up because there's less equipment down there, because most of it's reefer. So the market does change. You go down into Florida during produce season when there's less equipment and people are switching over to reefer trailers and leaving their vans. You will get better rates out of there.
Yeah, but then they stop paying going into there. California is a perfect example of that. You know, you can make $5,000 going into California, but when everybody was getting $10,000 out, now you're lucky to get $150 to go into California.
I'm kind of confused on why I'm telling people that it is up to the business owner to know how to run their business and the amount of money that they need for their business. And I get arguments. It's almost scary. We're not
saying that, Sage. What we're saying is, okay, if you have that premise, which I agree with you wholeheartedly,
but it's not. I don't believe. So my point is I don't believe it's your. If everybody, everybody bitches about that. Well, the dashboard says this and this says this. How much do you need to earn a profit? But everybody look, I got carriers that don't give a shit about the dashboard. They don't care. They don't care about. They say, look, this load's going to cost me this much, and this is what this is my fee. They don't care.
Okay, what if a broker now? Okay, taking that premise, you got a broker who's got the shipper, their customer. This broker bid on a load, thinking they bid a fair number, however they came up with that number to bid on it. They called 3 carriers. They all said this. Now all of a sudden, so they have a load.
Yeah.
They've gone through 20 carriers saying, I need this, I need this, I need this. And the shipper says to this broker, well, we've been here for over 15 years. We've been moving it for this price. We're not paying that we're not paying that rate. What's the market going to do?
Then So the shipper's been there for 15 years and the carrier wants this much price to find that, then you'll have to find a truck that can do it that's not that expensive.
But you've been working on this load for 2 weeks and no one will take it.
It doesn't. Then you'll have some. If they've been moving it for that, somebody obviously has taken it. Now, have they been using the rail?
Because all the carriers came together at a truck stop, and they finally agreed to come together, and we're going to stop these.
Well, then, if you're going to make up impossible hypotheticals, then what answer do you want? Because if you're making up the hypothetical to get your point across as right, just tell me that what your point is.
No,
I don't know.
All I'm saying is that you can know your costs, but if you have high costs and you live in a low market,
welcome to business. If I'm mowing lawns and it costs me $75 to mow a lawn and it costs somebody else $50 to mow a lawn, welcome to capitalism.
Well, here's the thing. So I'm not sure why you're fired up. We agree that carriers need to know their numbers.
The problem is that it's not my job or a broker's job. My point is it's not my job to tell you what the rate is.
So you never set the anchor first, right?
It's not about saying the anchor. It's not the anchor that I'm setting. It is basically you want me to tell you how much money I have in a load. Most drivers.
I've been booking my own loads since 2014. I have never once asked the broker how much they have.
Well, then I'll tell you what. I will literally do a day when I've got some fall off rate coming. I will literally let you listen into my phone calls when I post a load. Every single one of them will say, how much you got in it? How much you moving this for? How much you got?
And again, it goes back to what I've said in the past. Brokers are using that against us.
Yes. And what I'm trying to say is stop it.
So now they're assuming that, hey, if a broker is going to sit there and give me a low number because they don't want me to take too much money, then now they're just going straight to that conversation.
And the same
with you. And it's very frustrating to you, isn't it?
And the same thing is, let's say I go to my customer and I got a carrier that can do it for $1,000, but the going rate is $1,200. But my carrier comes back and says, "Well, I can do that one for $1,000." What do I tell my customer? Do I overcharge my customer? Do I say no? Do I charge more money?
Well, how about that? Let me ask you this.
Hang on that load and that load only. Do I gouge my customer?
Well, I mean, some do, some don't. So, but here's the deal. If you go to the customer and you say, "No, I can do this for $1,200," but then TQL comes in and says, "We can get it done for $800," because they got carriers that will do it.
Now is the going rate was $1,200. I get a carrier that I've had this all the time. I do this all the time. I got guys that'll come to me for a price and they'll say, "Hey, I got a local run from Houston to Houston. If you ask an over-the-road driver how much that would cost, that would probably be $650. Let's use simple numbers, right? But if you ask a local guy who only runs Texas, who's got a day cab, wants to be home every night, and who's only got insurance that covers 150 miles, he might say $450. So do I go to my customer for the $650 plus, or do I go to him for the $450 plus?
Well, it's been said that a lot of loads are done in bulk, and I've done a video on. Hold on.
Question.
Hold on. I did a batch of these Joplin to Rogers, and I mentioned that there were guys that were doing it for $350 a piece, and I was doing it for $550.
So I'm asking a specific question. If I have that scenario, which I've got one load, it's A or B. I've got one load. A or B? A, the more expensive one, or B, the cheaper one? Which one do I go to my customer for?
It depends on what the customer's needs are.
Yeah, there you go.
What their needs.
Depends on what the customer needs.
Okay,
I don't care what. It's based on my customer's needs.
I'll give you your customer's needs. He needs to move one load across town one time. I think I've already gone over this. Do you see how you guys can't answer? I can answer.
You're going to go with the cheaper one.
Look at T-Bone's question. So when someone asks you what you have in a load, you automatically assume they don't know the numbers.
What took you guys so long to answer that?
I answered it right away.
No, you didn't. You said depends on your customer's needs, and I already told you customers. You didn't have to beat around the bush. You didn't have to count.
You said he has to move it one time across the town. I answered. I said I'm going to go with the cheapest if they meet my safety requirements.
Correct. But now you have two different carriers for two different prices. But so when you go to somebody and you say, well, it should cost this, are you factoring any of that stuff? Are you factoring a possibility of finding a day cab? Are you factoring the possibility of finding somebody that? No, you're not.
But hang on, Sage, though. Again, I might be different, but before I've made that decision, I'm going to, if my customer, for example, because I have several of these, where they ask me to say, we got product at this warehouse that needs to deliver to this warehouse. Before I make my decision on what kind of carrier is going to be there, I'm going to know my shipper and consignee, what's their hours, what are their loading times like, because all of that plays into a factor. The cheap guy may not, what's my history with them? If it's a load where the places are a little bit complicated to work with, I'm going to put, I might go with my more expensive carrier because of the fact that this warehouse is not super easy to work with. And it all depends on my history. On the more expensive one, if I have a history of 50, 100 loads with,
all right, so
the cheap guys I've never met before, and he's called me out of the blue, and he's not set up with me, I'm going to go with the more expensive. So to give you a simple answer, I can't, and I won't. I'm sorry.
They're both you've worked with. They're both the same. They're absolutely the same. And the point of the matter is that if you are quoting your customer's freight based on what you think the equipment that's in the area, are you helping your customer or hurting your customer? And like it or not, it happens to me every single day almost. Because there are times where I will quote something on a low pro step deck instead of quoting it on an RGN stretch. Because I know it will go on a low pro step deck. And I win the bid. And I find the proper equipment to do the job. And I only quote that equipment. So I will find a carrier that has the proper equipment. I'm not going to look for a carrier that has an over the road when I can find a local carrier that runs a day cab and say, hey, how much for you to do this? And so for me, and this is what, if drivers knew, all drivers, and this is the biggest bitch, all drivers had to do is know how to run their business. Run your business as a capitalist company and know what you need to turn a profit. And I find the better drivers know, they don't ask me. They know what they need. I just say, hey, how much to do this? They give me their price. I go back to the customer and I say, here, I got a truck that can pick up blah, 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 blah. Will this work? And here's the price for that. And the customer makes that decision. I don't make the decision and say, here's the price to the customer. I say, I tell them that this is what the carrier needs to get this done. And
Sage, here's an example. You tell me if I'm wrong on what I did here.
All right.
I just bid on a job, 200 units to move from Ontario to a port for export.
Okay.
$503,800 Canadian on these loads. The initial request came in on these units saying we need double drops or RGN or step deck with ramps. Well, in this particular lane, because of the nature of the loading of these, as you know,
double drop don't have ramps.
No, but I'm saying is that they wanted a self-loading truck. So it could be a step deck with ramps, it could be a double drop, it could be an RGN, and anything. But they want to ship two of these units together.
You want correction on that?
Hang on.
Double drop. It's got to be an RGN or a low pro step deck with ramps. Not a double drop.
You're missing the point, Sage. Can you fit a 40-foot? Can you fit 40 feet, 2 units on an RGN without it being a double stretch? No, you need a. So I'm trying to show you what I broker.
Whoa! I'm telling you right now, you're
missing the story, Sage.
No,
I need to get the whole. You need context to get the whole story before you start interjecting.
I'm telling you right now the point of my story.
But I'm the one that started this story, and you don't know the point of my story. So you say what you're going to say. Go ahead and say. Go ahead and say what you're going to say.
You cannot stretch an RGN to put multiple pieces on it.
Sage, that's the point of my story. Okay. The customer is asking for a roll. They wanted something that can be self-driven on. They wanted 2 of these trucks shipped at once per load, and it would take up 40 feet. And so they wanted a step deck with ramps was the initial request. And I said, well, getting step deck with ramps that can fit this style because of the ramps being at an angle is not easy. So because there's 200 loads, I came back to them because it was taking a long time. I was not getting any bites. I was trying to find I wanted this to be like 4 or 5 carriers because there's 200 loads. So hang on. Let me finish, please.
Yeah.
So I came back and I said to the customer, why don't we rent a ramp? Why don't you guys rent a ramp for the 200 loads? It's going to take us 3 months to move this. And they agreed that we'll make an arrangement. So what did that do now? Because they have a ramp, and I confirmed at the port that is delivering to that they have ramps. I had five carriers confirm with me that yes, the specific port you're going to, we can back in there, and they have ramps to pull these off. So what did that do for us now? By having ramps, what did that do? We can now run these all on step decks.
You can run them on step. How much do they weigh each?
7,000 kg, so 14,000 pounds of load.
What I would have done for me, I would have got a 53-foot step deck with ramps because the ramp slide under.
Yeah, you can say you want that. And I tried Sage. I worked on this for 2 weeks. Don't tell me I didn't do my job. I called all the carriers I know, and they said, well, we got 1 truck with step decks with ramps. I called carriers. I posted it, and I got no bites. I called my network of carriers. I called and emailed. I showed pictures. I showed everything. They're like, well, we got one truck. So by the time they do a cycle, it's going to take them a week to go where they are and coming back and so forth. So the summary is, by my interjecting to the customer saying we need to approach this differently, I then laid out a plan. The whole point is that, so if I would have just relied on the shipper saying, well, they want this and this, and I didn't interject.
Correct. So at that point, you did it right. You found carriers to do the job. You found carriers to find out if they can do it. Correct.
Yeah, but the reason I was able to bid on the job the way I did is it saved them a ton of money, because the same carriers, when I asked them, I said, okay, why don't you give me 2 rates? Because I said, worst case scenario is, if we have to, we're going to have to use tilt deck trucks, right? Where we hire a tilt deck to load it and then back it across onto the step deck. And
you could
they gave me 2 rates. They were giving me 2 rates for the step deck with ramps and non-ramps, and the price was higher. So I showed the customer an alternative option, and they agreed. Not the bid isn't finalized yet, but the point is I was able to change the bid to step decks, and that made a huge difference because I don't need ramps. It's like I always say, there's a funnel of freight of trucks. Every condition you have makes that funnel smaller and smaller.
Absolutely.
But because through this process, that's my whole point.
You could,
as a broker, if I just relied on the shippers telling me things, that I interjected and I helped achieve the end goal of getting the bid on.
That's our job, but our job is not technically to dictate the price.
No, but hang on, Sage, to twist words to the positive on a flip side. So we've discussed that carriers need to know their rates and need to know. And we've discussed the issue of how many times a carrier calls in and says, how much do you need in the load? Now, we've also established that based on that shippers shipping bottles of water know how much they need. So to take the negative of our perception that carriers are calling in just saying, how much do you need or how much do you have in the load? Guess where that came from? If we just twist this around, that the reason for them asking how much do you have in the load is because these carriers calling are assuming the shippers are dictating the price to the broker.
Again,
just twist that words around. Think about that from that perspective. If, to your point, and the C.H. Robinson lawsuit, I'm a broker, I've established a relationship with this customer, and they ship bottles of water or toilet paper or something high, low value, high volume. They say to me, Rob, we got 20 loads we want to ship, and they want to pay $1,000 on, on 2,900 miles. Okay.
Yeah.
We're willing to pay $1,000 or $2,000 on whatever the price. Like, it's a ridiculous price is my point.
Yeah.
The shipper says, I have 20 loads and I'm paying $1.45 a mile.
Yep.
So I put it out there. I work it out so that I'm posting out there, and I say, how much you got in it? And I say, oh, I can do 950. Well, no, I need 15. I need $1,900.
Mm-hmm. Well,
so my point is that the carriers, even though there's a load posted, and even if a broker says, I only have this much in it, the carriers always have the right to say, I need this much for the load, and they have the right to refuse a load.
Correct.
Even if they take the book now, and then once they got the details, like say a carrier goes out there and clicks on a click and go, clicks on it, accepts it, the full confirmation comes in. He reads the details and realizes, hey, this is going to a Kroger. They're telling me it's got a 10 o'clock appointment. I've been to this place 5 times. There's no such thing as an appointment. I'm going to be there for 6 hours. You can call the broker saying, look, I clicked this load without the knowledge that it was a Kroger. I see this. I've been there this many times. I can, if you want the load, either you have to put in writing, you're going to pay me detention after the 2 hours, or pay me this higher price, because the chances in my experience is they don't pay detention. So I want the money up front, or you put it in writing, you're agreeing to the detention. And if they say, no, we're not paying you more and we're not paying you detention, you can say, I know I accepted this, but I'm declining the load now. I'm giving it back to you.
I've had to kind of do that. I didn't see the trailer recommendation or the trailer requirements. I clicked on a load. I think it was Coyote. I booked it, and I ended up having to call them and say I can't do that load because now you're saying it needs a 10-year or newer trailer. But anyways, guys, you guys have been great. I think a lot of people enjoyed the conversation. And the bottom line is know your numbers, whether you're a broker or a driver. So
and yeah, just before you cut out, Steve, I was going to say, Sage, I'm not coming down at it. Just like, I think you and I play well to give different perspectives.
Absolutely.
On the same topic.
I don't say, listen, and just so everybody knows, this might be a WWE situation, but off me and CDN Freight, I've contacted him off, and we talk all the time. So we don't in any way take this off this thing here. We go back and forth. I've shot stuff to him. I've called him I've asked questions about LTL freight and stuff like that over the phone. So what you hear here is just two different opinions being discussed. So it's
hey, so I got you. That text message you sent me. I've tried to reach out to that person about that equipment there twice, but no call back.
Let it go at that point. I mean, you can only do so much at that point. But
excellent, Steve. Thanks for letting us on.
All right, thank you guys, and I'm going to kick you both out here. There you go. Hey, this is Snorelord. Thanks for watching this clip from one of my live feeds. If you don't mind, hit the thumbs up, subscribe, and we try to go live, and we try to do some recorded videos, and hit the thumbs up, and it helps the algorithms. It helps the YouTube, Google gods. So thanks for watching.